Extension Service is one of those real jewels in this country. Anyone who's ever used it, anyone who's ever been in 4-H, anyone who's ever had a relative who's participated in a contest sponsored, anyone who's ever gone to the home extension economist or the county agent to ask a technical question understands what an important asset.
At noon on April 22nd, 1889, settlers lined up for the first Oklahoma land run. By the end of that day, Oklahoma City and Guthrie would come into existence with at least 10,000 new citizens. Many of the settlers were not looking for life in the towns and cities, but somewhere to grow crops and raise livestock. They wanted to be farmers. And this posed a problem. Little was known about the climate or soils in the new territory. These new farmers weren't quite sure what to plant, and in some cases even how to farm. One crop that did show promise was cotton, particularly in southern Oklahoma. King cotton, as it was called during the Civil War, still dominated the South. The yearly cotton crops fed local cotton gins before being shipped to textile mills on the East Coast. But in 1892, the Mexican boll weevil crossed the Rio Grande River into Texas.
Went walking across his field. Boll weevil took his cotton and turned the corn to meal.
The beetle fed on cotton buds and flowers and spread at a rate of 60 miles per year throughout the South. Entire farms and even towns were abandoned as it moved into new areas. In an effort to save the industry, the federal government turned to a past college administrator and agriculturist by the name of Seaman Knapp. While serving as president of Iowa State College, Knapp started a campus farm to experiment with local crops and production methods. It was so successful, Congress asked him to help write the Hatch Act, a federal law that established similar experimental farms at every agricultural college throughout the U.S. But farmers often never heard about or ignored the new discoveries and farm practices made at these facilities. What was needed was a way to extend this knowledge directly to farmers. Knapp began by setting up a demonstration farm in Terrell, Texas. The demonstration farm was so successful that in 1904, Congress appropriated funds to form the Office of Farmers Cooperative Demonstration Work. Knapp knew the problems went far beyond the boll weevil, which only exposed wrong farming and bad business practices. Farming to him was both science and art. The science of agriculture could be taught, but becoming a successful farmer also required observation, experience, and good business methods. Farmers of the day were deeply suspicious of the federal government telling them what to do. A better way was to show them. Knapp expanded demonstration farms throughout the state. To help establish these farms, Knapp began hiring special agents. These agents were usually young men with agricultural backgrounds. They traveled the state, visiting with farmers in their demonstration fields at least once a month between planting and harvesting. But they also tried to help any farmer in need. One of the agents hired was a Texan farmer named Walter Dimmitt Bentley. After 3 years of lecturing, Knapp asked Bentley to help develop an extension service in the western part of Indian Territory. In late summer of 1907, Bentley became the first extension agent assigned to Oklahoma. Taking the charge from Knapp, Bentley began hiring new agents for every county and securing new demonstration farms. In time, the effort would come to be known as the Cooperative Extension Service, and at least in Oklahoma, extension agents would be renamed extension educators.
You think of the university, you think of educators. And our role in extension really is to take the university to the people, to teach and train them, to engage with them in solving their problems. An agent, on the other hand, often carries the connotation of somebody who's enforcing regulations, and we don't do that.
The demonstration farms that Bentley set up are long gone, replaced by an extension office in every county. And while educators still work closely with agriculture producers, their mission is to help every Oklahoman.
We have this remarkable presence in all 77 counties, which gives us the ability to extend what's going on here on the campus in Stillwater throughout the state today instantly through technology and through our extension agents.
While Knapp and Bentley were establishing a federal extension service, Oklahoma State University, then known as Oklahoma Agricultural and Mechanical College, was also establishing programs to help local farmers and ranchers. The relationship between the federal and state programs was not always cordial, but each side made an effort to work with the other. Bentley's agents would meet at the new college whenever possible to help promote harmony and friendly relations. As its name suggested, Oklahoma A&M already had a large stake in agriculture. It was a land-grant university.
The land-grant system was set up under the Lincoln administration in the 1860s to make it possible for every citizen to have access to an education.
And at that time, the only real universities around were private, and the only people that went to those universities were the privileged. Lincoln thought everybody ought to be able to go to college and that it would be good for the country.
The Morrill Act was passed in 1862, but it would be another 30 years before the government established a land-grant university in Indian Territory.
And what the land grant refers to is that the federal government had a lot of land in every state, and the bargain was that we'll give you land to build your university, but that university must focus on certain areas. And those areas were agriculture and mechanical, and in the early days, military for male students. But it goes on to say not to the exclusion of the cultural arts.
Oklahoma A&M began in 1890. A second Morrill Act would create a land-grant system serving African Americans in Oklahoma and establish Langston University 7 years later. The campus of Oklahoma A&M College was located on the grounds of Oklahoma Agricultural Experiment Station in Stillwater. Created by the Hatch Act, the experiment station researched local crops and agricultural techniques for Oklahoma producers.
Even at the very beginning, they would send out bulletins and eventually began sending out circulars. These went out to local communities. They would occasionally have demonstration farm events and invite people to Stillwater and to the experiment station.
One such event was the Farmers Institute. These were usually 2 days of lectures and discussions and offered free of charge. Once Oklahoma A&M was established, it too began a series of short courses and movable schools on agriculture. Modern Extension continues to work hard to keep Oklahoma producers up to date. One-day events called Field Days demonstrate the latest advances in agriculture, and short courses still provide both novices and seasoned producers the information and training to improve their profitability.
.4-H programs introduce students to the Extension Service and Oklahoma State University really from the very beginning. And in my opinion, it's one of the great leadership programs in this country, and that's run through the Extension offices.
Although generally everyone appreciated their efforts, early Extension agents often had difficulty convincing older farmers. They found it was the younger farmers who were willing to experiment with new ideas. To improve the future of agriculture, the next generation of farmers needed to be involved. In 1908, the college began encouraging boys and girls agricultural clubs throughout the state.
The first extension clubs for boys and girls were corn and cotton clubs. The boys and girls were given seeds and instructions for how to take care of those.
Within a year, 569 boys and girls had joined. 4 years later, more than 15,000 young people were engaged in club work. The college also sponsored a number of contests with sizable prizes offered by the Farmers Institute, Board of Agriculture, A&M, and other cooperating agencies. As the youth programs grew, other clubs were added. Extension began a tomato club for girls in 1912 and a pig club 1 year later. Club members competed at the county level, with the winners exhibiting at local county fairs. Some would win trips to the state fairs in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. All the Boys and Girls Clubs were eventually brought together under one name, 4-H, standing for Head, Heart, Hands, and Health. Today, 4-H clubs encompass hundreds of program areas. Local children can show off winning produce and exhibits at county and state fairs. Livestock shows throughout the state allow young people to learn the value of raising and caring for animals.
The livestock side, the shooting sports, that's always going to be there, like it always has been. It will always be strong. But I think I see it's also kind of just changing with the world, kind of what's going on out there today.
4-H members also participate in ATV safety courses, shooting sports, and even science and technology. If agriculture was going to be a profitable enterprise, educating the farmer or even his children was not going to be enough. Early extension agents realized they would have to help the farmers' wives as well. Girls' clubs already provided education on cooking and sewing, but the spouses of farmers were critical to success of the farms. Women ran the homes and often dealt with finances while the farmers were in the field. Unfortunately, while the husbands could attend short courses, the wives had little opportunity to travel. Extension would have to bring the knowledge to them. Much of the education centered around canning, both as a way to use surplus produce from the fields and gardens and provide an extra source of income by selling it to neighbors.
It was really important to have some way to preserve that food. Once you had an abundance at certain times of year, then there needed to be some way to save it for the times of year when there wasn't an abundance.
In 1912, Bentley hired 11 women extension agents with the mandate to form home demonstration clubs. The following year, he added 4 more, including Annie Peters of Boley, Oklahoma, the first female African-American extension agent in the United States.
She did canning for a great many years. In fact, some of her innovations in canning lasted several decades after she left. Now, one thing I think was really interesting in her picture, it shows her with glass canning jars, and most of the rest of the country were using tin and solder to keep them closed.
Much of the work that Annie and all the women extension agents did now falls under family and consumer sciences. FCS educators help all Oklahomans and their families with a variety of health and safety programs tailored to meet the needs of each county. As the first decade in the new century wore on, friction between the federal extension and state systems increased. Attempts were made to merge the two, but always broke down over funding and who was in charge. In Oklahoma, relations between the agents were generally friendly. But the state's and the college's agricultural efforts were overseen by the Board of Agriculture, a very political group that didn't appreciate federal intervention. And then in 1911, after losing his wife a year earlier, Dr. Seaman Knapp, the father of extension, died. 3 years later, a compromise was struck on the federal level in the form of the Smith-Lever Act, combining the two systems. The U.S. Department of Agriculture would provide funding and support to the state cooperative extension system that would in turn support county offices.
Yeah, the word cooperative and cooperative extension means that we receive funding from all 3 federal, state, and county sources, and that it is a cooperation between those 3 forms of government that funds extension.
The question for Oklahoma was, who would run the state system, Bentley or someone appointed by the State Board of Agriculture, which had become the governing body of Oklahoma A&M. Previous attempts to reach an agreement between the two had failed, largely due to college president J.H. Connor. But the board was deeply unpopular, and through a vote of the people was replaced with one appointed by the governor. On May 8, 1914, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Smith-Lever Act into law. That August, Bentley moved into Morrill Hall on the campus of Oklahoma A&M just in time for the building to burn to the ground. Although much of those early records were lost, Oklahoma Extension went on to thrive in the new state.
When the Smith-Lever Act was passed in 1914, one of the expectations was that the federal government was going to provide resources, monetary resources, that it needed to be matched by the state government and the local government. And it's a three-way partnership that we've got, and it served us very well for the last 100 years.
And the triangle basically represents the three missions of the land-grant college, teaching, research, and extension, and we refer to them in that order because that's the way they were enacted by our forefathers and government in Washington. That 3 acts actually created those 3 missions. First act being the Morrill Act in 1862, which formed the university, the teaching arm. About 25 years later, the Hatch Act established the experiment station and the research arm. And then finally, 25 years later, in 1914, we established the third side of the triangle, extension.
One change Extension has seen in the last 100 years is assisting in community development. County and state educators work with local civic leaders to help diversify their economy and prepare for the future. Whether it's expanding small and home-based businesses, training elected officials, or providing strategic and community planning, Extension is an important partner to rural and urban Oklahoma. Bentley would come to be known as Daddy Bentley by his employees. He left the Extension Service in 1916 for Washington, D.C., only to return to Oklahoma A&M a year later. During his tenure, Bentley would work with an old friend, Bradford Knapp, son of Seaman Knapp. Bradford served as college president from 1923 to 1928. In 1930, at the age of 73 and still an extension agent, Bentley suddenly died.
I think Bentley would be surprised at the extent of the extension network now. I think he would be amazed at the way we can reach people in so many different ways that he would have never imagined.
This animal and this animal are the same species.
I actually think the best years of the Extension Service are ahead of us.
The world is not as it was in 1914. My home county is not as it was in 1970. But we give the Extension Service the ability to change, to grow, to meet the needs out there. And given that flexibility, the Extension Service will.
The main thing that I love about Extension is that I am confident that I can tell people if they want the true answer, the accurate answer, they need to come to the OSU Extension office.
Well, we often talk about there's information and there's knowledge. You can find information all over the place, and trying to make sense out of it is the key of what Extension does. Plus, backing it with the scientific research and experimentation to know which of those ideas and information actually works in your own local environment.
How you doing, Keith?
To have a face associated with that information and to help tailor that to you or to your family or to your children is something that Extension has a long 100-year history of providing, and I think it's important that we continue that for the next 100 years.